I found out my entire life had been demolished while I was standing in line at a coffee shop. It was a Tuesday morning, October 17th. I remember because I'd just checked my phone to confirm a client meeting scheduled for noon, and instead of the calendar reminder, I saw 43 missed calls, 17 voicemails, and a text from my mother that said only 5 words. How could you do this? I didn't know what this was. Not yet. But my stomach already knew something was deeply wrong, the way your body sometimes understands a disaster before your brain catches up. My name is Jessamine Thornberry. I'm 26 years old. I work as a program coordinator for a nonprofit that provides housing assistance to families in crisis, which is ironic, because in about 72 hours, I wouldn't be able to show my face at my own workplace without people whispering behind their hands. My older brother, Callum, had made a single phone call. One call. 13 minutes long. And in those 13 minutes, he told my mother, who told my aunt, who told everyone in our family and half our hometown, that I had stolen $30,000 from my late grandmother's estate, that I had forged a document, that I had manipulated our dying grandmother into changing her will during her final weeks, cutting Callum and our parents out of money that was rightfully theirs. None of it was true, not one word. But here's what Callum didn't know, what he couldn't have known, because he never imagined I'd be careful enough to protect myself from my own brother. I had a recording. Not of the phone call he made to our mother. Something much worse. Something that captured exactly whose idea the money scheme really was, in his own voice, with details he could never explain away. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That recording didn't matter yet. Not on that Tuesday morning in October, standing in a coffee shop with my phone buzzing like something alive in my hand. That morning, all I knew was that the world I had carefully built over the last 4 years was collapsing, and I didn't even understand why. Before I go on, if this story hits close to home, take a second to like and subscribe. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I always want to know where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I called my mother back first. That was my mistake. I should have taken a breath. I should have sat down somewhere quiet and listened to the voicemails first so I'd know what I was walking into. But I called her because that's what you do when your mom sends you a message like that. You call. You assume there's been a misunderstanding. She picked up on the first ring. Mom, what's going on? I have all these missed. Don't, she said. Her voice was the kind of calm that's worse than yelling. Flat. Already decided. Callum told us everything. He showed us the paperwork. I cannot believe you would do this to your own family. To your grandmother's memory. What paperwork? Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. The estate lawyer confirmed it, Jessamine, the account transfer. $30,000 moved into a personal account with your name on it. You had her change the disbursement 2 weeks before she passed. My chest went tight. Not because I was guilty, because I recognized the shape of what was happening. I recognized the precision of it, the specific dollar amount, the mention of a lawyer confirming it, the timing pinned to Grandma Lily's final days. This wasn't a rumor or a misunderstanding. This was a constructed story. Someone had built this carefully, placed every brick, and then lit the match. Mom, that is not what happened. I need you to listen to me. I've heard enough. Your father can't even speak right now. He's sitting at the kitchen table and he hasn't moved in an hour. You broke him, Jessamine. She hung up. I stood there in that coffee shop holding my phone with both hands and I felt something I'd never felt before. Not sadness, not anger, but a kind of freefall. Like someone had pulled the floor out and I was just suspended in the air, waiting to hit the ground. I tried Callum next, straight to voicemail. I tried my Aunt Petra. She answered, but only to say, I think you need professional help. And then she hung up too. Within 6 hours, my cousin Rochelle had posted a vague but unmistakable message on social media about family members who steal from the dead. It got 47 comments. 3 of my coworkers saw it. One of them sent it to me with a question mark. By that evening, I was sitting alone in my apartment, in the dark, on the floor next to my bed, trying to figure out how my brother had done this, how he'd gotten the details so clean, how he'd prepped the evidence before I even knew there was a fight. And buried underneath all of that, the question I didn't want to ask but couldn't stop asking: why? Because 3 months ago, Callum had sat across from me at a restaurant, smiled, and told me he was proud of me. He'd said, "You're the only one in this family who actually turned out decent, Jess." 3 months. That's all the distance between that sentence and the complete destruction of my name. What I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't understand until much later, was that Callum hadn't snapped. He hadn't acted out of sudden emotion. He had been planning this for almost a year. And the reason he'd been so warm to me that night at the restaurant was because he needed me to trust him for just a little while longer. But that's a part of the story I'll get to. First, you need to understand where Callum and I came from. Because this didn't start with a phone call. It started decades earlier, in a house where one child could do no wrong and the other could never do enough. Our house growing up was a split level on Martin Lane, in a town called Bridgehaven, about 40 minutes outside of Philadelphia. Brown brick, white shutters that needed repainting every summer but never got it. A backyard with a rusted swing set that our dad always said he'd replace but never did. From the outside, it looked like every other house on that street. Normal, stable, the kind of place where nothing terrible happens. But inside that house, there was a system, and the system was simple. Callum was the sun, and the rest of us orbited around him. He was 3 years older than me, born premature, spent 11 days in the NICU, and my parents never quite recovered from the fear of losing him. My mother used to tell that story at every family gathering, how tiny he was, how the doctors weren't sure he'd make it, how she stayed by his incubator and prayed for 72 hours straight. And by the time I came along, healthy, full term, no complications, the emotional real estate in that family had already been claimed. I'm not saying my parents didn't love me. They did. But there's a difference between being loved and being seen. Callum was seen. Every room he walked into, the energy shifted toward him. If he was upset, dinner was delayed until he calmed down. If he got a B- on a test, there were emergency talks about whether his teachers were being fair. If I got straight A's, my mother would smile and say, "That's nice, Jessamine," the way you acknowledge the weather. I learned early that the way to exist in that family was to be easy. No problems, no needs, no noise. I became the child who packed her own lunch starting at age 8, who figured out how to braid her own hair by watching YouTube tutorials in the bathroom mirror, who stopped asking to be driven to friends' houses because the answer was always, "Maybe later, your brother has practice." Callum played baseball, travel team, then high school varsity, then a partial college scholarship that fell through after one semester because he blew out his shoulder and decided to stop going to class. But even that failure got reframed. He wasn't a dropout. He was figuring things out. He was taking time to find his path. My parents covered his rent for 3 years while he bounced between part-time jobs and startup ideas that never launched. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs through community college, transferred to a state university on a need-based scholarship, and graduated with a degree in social work. When I told my parents I'd been hired at the nonprofit, a real salaried position with benefits, my father said, "That's good, Jess. Hey, did your brother tell you about his new business idea? I think this one might actually work." I remember sitting at the kitchen table during that phone call, holding my fork very still, looking at the grain of the wood and thinking, I could cure a disease, and they'd ask me if I'd heard Callum's latest plan. But here's the thing about Callum. He wasn't cruel in an obvious way. Not back then. He wasn't the kind of brother who hit you or screamed at you or locked you out of the house. He was something more complicated. He was charming, funny, the kind of person who could make you feel like the most important person in the world for exactly as long as he needed something from you. He'd borrow money and bring you flowers the next day. Not to pay you back, but to make you feel guilty for even thinking about the money. He'd cancel plans with you, and then later tell a story about it at a party in a way that made it sound like you were the one who flaked. He could rearrange reality with a smile, and people believed him. That was his gift. Callum had this low, steady voice and these wide brown eyes that made everything he said sound like a confession, like he was letting you in on something private. My mother once told me, "Your brother has a good heart, Jessamine. He just expresses it differently." That sentence lived inside me like a splinter for years. Grandma Lily was the only person in the family who saw through it. She was my father's mother. 78 when she got sick, 80 when she passed. She lived alone in a cottage-style house in Ridley Park, about 20 minutes from us. Floral wallpaper in every room. A kitchen that always smelled like rosemary and butter. She kept a ceramic rooster on the windowsill above the sink that she'd had since 1974, and she talked to it sometimes when she thought no one was listening. Grandma Lily was sharp. Not mean, but direct in a way that made people uncomfortable. She'd watch Callum perform at family dinners, telling stories, making everyone laugh, doing his golden boy routine. And she'd sit quietly with her hands folded, watching him the way you watch a card trick when you already know where the ace is. She told me once when I was about 19, sitting on her back porch in the summer, "Your brother is a good talker, Jessamine, but you watch what people do, not what they say. Talking is free. Actions cost something." I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time. I thought she was just being old-fashioned. But she'd seen something in Callum long before I had. She'd seen the pattern, the way he'd show up when he wanted something and disappear when he didn't. The way he'd visit her when he needed money, and then not call for months. She kept a small notebook in her kitchen drawer, and years later, after she passed, I found it. She'd written down every time Callum visited, and next to each entry, she'd noted what he asked for. March 4th, Callum came for dinner, asked about the savings account. June 19th, Callum brought flowers, asked if I'd updated my will. September 2nd, Callum called, wanted to know about the house deed. Page after page, years of entries. She never confronted him about it. She just watched, and she wrote it down. When her health started declining, the pancreatic diagnosis came in January, and by March she was in hospice. Callum suddenly became the most devoted grandson in the world. He visited 3 times a week. He brought soup. He sat by her bed and held her hand and told her stories about when he was a kid. My parents were moved to tears by it. "See?" my mother said. "See how much he loves her?" I visited too, but I didn't perform. I just sat with her, read to her, helped the hospice nurse change her sheets, brought her the specific brand of peppermint tea she liked, the one in the green box from the Polish grocery store 2 towns over. Small things, quiet things. And during one of those quiet visits, about 2 weeks before she passed, Grandma Lily grabbed my wrist with more strength than I thought she had left. She looked at me, and her eyes were completely clear despite the medication. "Jessamine," she said, "promise me you'll be careful." "Careful about what, Grandma?" She didn't answer right away. She just held my wrist and stared at me like she was trying to press the warning directly into my skin. "He's going to come for what's mine," she whispered, "and he's going to make it look like it was your fault." I told her she was confused. I told her the medication was making her anxious. I adjusted her pillow and kissed her forehead and told her not to worry. She died 13 days later, and I spent the next several months learning that she had been right about everything. Grandma Lily's estate wasn't large, but it wasn't nothing. The house in Ridley Park, which was paid off. A savings account with just under $90,000, a small life insurance policy, and a few personal items she'd specified in her will. Her wedding ring to my mother, a watch collection to my father, and the ceramic rooster from the kitchen windowsill to me. She'd written that last part in by hand, in the margin of the will, with a little smiley face next to it. That detail still makes me cry if I think about it too long. The will had been updated about 8 months before she died, through her estate attorney, a man named Donald Prewitt, who'd handled her affairs for over a decade. The update was straightforward. The house would be sold, and the proceeds split evenly between Callum and me. The savings account would also be split evenly. The life insurance went to my father. 50-50. Fair. Clean. Grandma Lily had been deliberate about that. But here's where things started to shift. About 3 months after the funeral, Callum called me. It was a Sunday evening, late around 10:30. I was already in bed, half watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures, when my phone lit up. I almost didn't answer because Callum rarely called me directly. Most of our communication went through the family group chat or through my mother acting as a relay, but I picked up. "Hey Jess, you got a minute?" His voice had that particular softness he used when he wanted something. I recognized it immediately, the way you recognize a song from the first 2 notes. "Sure, what's up?" "So I've been looking into the estate stuff, and I think there might be a way to simplify things, speed up the process. I talked to a financial guy, and he said if we consolidate the savings into one account before the probate finalizes, we avoid some tax complications. He suggested putting it temporarily into one of our names, and then splitting it after." I sat up in bed. "What do you mean, one of our names?" "Yours, ideally, since you're the more responsible one." He laughed. A light, easy laugh. "I mean, no one's going to question it if the money sits in your account for a few weeks. You're the one with the actual career. I'm still the family screw-up, right?" Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. Not alarm exactly. More like a low hum of recognition, the same frequency as Grandma Lily's warning. "I don't think that's how probate works, Callum. I'm just telling you what the financial guy said. But hey, no pressure. Think about it." He changed the subject after that. Asked about my job. Told me a funny story about his roommate's dog. Normal brother stuff. And when we hung up, I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Almost. But something made me do a thing I'd never done before. The next time Callum called, 4 days later, a Thursday, I opened the voice memo app on my phone before I answered. I set it to record and placed the phone on the kitchen counter on speaker. I don't know why exactly. Instinct. Or maybe Grandma Lily's voice was still in my ear, whispering about being careful. Either way, I pressed record. That Thursday call was the one that mattered. Callum was more direct this time. He'd done more research, he said. He explained a scenario where I would authorize a transfer of $30,000, roughly my half of the savings, into a temporary holding account that his financial advisor had set up. The money would be parked there for 60 days while the tax situation got sorted, and then it would come back to me, clean and simple. "And what about your half?" I asked. "Mine stays where it is for now. We stagger it. His advice, not mine." "Callum, this doesn't sound right. Why wouldn't the estate attorney handle this?" "Prewitt is old school, Jess. He doesn't understand the new tax codes. This is a better route. Trust me." There it was. Trust me. The 2 words that should have ended the conversation. But I kept going. Not because I was considering it. I wasn't. I kept going because I wanted to hear how far he would take it. So, you want me to sign something authorizing this transfer? Yeah. I can send you the form. You just sign. I handle the rest. And the money goes into an account your financial guy controls? Temporarily. Yeah. It's totally normal. I asked him the name of the financial advisor. He hesitated. Just a half-second pause, barely noticeable, and then said, Greg Pallister. He's with a firm in Wilmington. Okay. Let me think about it. Don't think too long, Jess. The window on this tax thing closes at the end of the month. We hung up. I stopped the recording. And then I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the ceramic rooster I'd brought home from Grandma Lily's house, the one she'd left to me, the one she'd talked to when she thought no one was listening. I Googled Greg Pallister. No results. I searched the firm in Wilmington. Nothing. I called Donald Prewitt the next morning and asked him about the tax situation Callum had described. Prewitt was quiet for a moment, and then he said, Jessamine, there is no tax complication. The estate disbursement is straightforward. No one has contacted me about any changes. That was when I knew. My brother was trying to steal my inheritance, and the form he wanted me to sign would have made it look like I had authorized the transfer myself. Meaning when the money disappeared, it would appear to be my doing. But I didn't confront him. I didn't call my parents. I sat with it, sick to my stomach, for 3 days. And then, Callum made his move first. He called our mother on that Tuesday morning, October 17th, and flipped the entire story. In his version, I had already moved the money. I had manipulated Grandma Lily into changing the disbursement in my favor. I had forged a document. He told her he'd discovered it while reviewing the estate paperwork, that he'd contacted a lawyer, that there was proof. He took the scheme he'd tried to run on me and pinned it on me before I could say a word. My mother believed him instantly. My father believed him. My aunt, my cousins, my grandmother's friends from church, they all believed him. Because Callum had laid the groundwork for months. Every visit to Grandma Lily's bedside, every show of devotion, every public display of grief, it was all preparation. He was building himself into the loyal grandson so that when he pointed the finger at me, the story would already make sense in everyone's mind. Jessamine, the quiet one. The one who was always a little too independent. The one who moved away and didn't call enough. Of course she'd be the one to do something like this. The calls came in waves that day. My mother, my aunt, 2 cousins I barely spoke to. Each one had already made up their mind. Each one spoke to me like I was a stranger who had broken into their family and taken something that didn't belong to me. By Wednesday evening, I was sitting on my bathroom floor with my back against the tub, staring at the ceiling, and I felt something I'd never felt before. Not sadness, not rage, something hollower than both. A feeling like being erased. Like the person I'd spent 26 years becoming had been overwritten in a single day by a story someone else told about me. I didn't eat that day. I didn't sleep that night. I called in sick to work on Thursday and spent the entire day on the couch under a blanket, holding my phone, opening the voice memo app, listening to the first few seconds of that recording, and then closing it again. Because I had the proof. I had Callum's voice, describing his own scheme, in detail, with his own mouth. But the thought of using it made me feel like I was going to vomit. This was my brother. The boy who taught me to ride a bike in the driveway on Marden Lane. The teenager who let me sit in his room and do homework while he played guitar. Badly, with the amp too loud. The person who, despite everything, I had still loved, in that stubborn, unexamined way you love family. Not because they've earned it, but because they're woven into the earliest version of who you are. And now I was holding a recording that could destroy him. I didn't know yet whether I would use it. I didn't know what came next. All I knew was that every single person in my family had chosen his version of events over mine without even asking me a single question. And that silence, their silence, my silence, was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The first week was the worst. Not because of any single moment, but because of the accumulation. It's the small things that break you when something like this happens, not the big dramatic confrontation that almost feels manageable because at least there's energy in it, something to push against. It's the quiet rejections, the slow, methodical disappearance of people who were supposed to be permanent. On Thursday, 2 days after Callum's phone call to our mother, I tried calling my father directly. He was always the softer one, the listener. Growing up, when my mother was busy managing Callum's latest crisis, my dad would sometimes sit with me on the porch steps and not say much of anything, just be there. I thought maybe he'd at least hear me out. He picked up. I could hear the television in the background. A football game. The low murmur of a commentator calling a play. "Dad, I need to talk to you about what Callum said. It's not true. None of it." A long pause. Then, "Your mother and I have discussed this. We think it's best if you work it out with the estate lawyer directly. We don't want to be in the middle." "You're not in the middle, Dad. You're my father. I'm telling you, I didn't do this." Another pause. Then the sound of him clearing his throat, and his voice dropped lower, like he didn't want my mother to hear. "Jess, he showed us the documents. The account with your name on it. I don't know what happened, but it doesn't look good." "What documents?" "I never signed anything. There is no account." "I have to go. Your mother's calling me." He hung up, and I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone against my chest, and realized something that felt like swallowing a stone. My father didn't want to know the truth. The truth would mean his son had lied. It would mean the golden child had been running a scheme. And that was a reality my father couldn't afford, because it would collapse the entire structure of a family that had been built around Callum being the center of everything. It was easier to believe me, easier to lose the quiet daughter than to question the loud son. I tried one more person. My cousin Rochelle, the one who'd posted that vague accusation on social media. We'd been close as teenagers. She used to sleep over at my house on weekends, and we'd stay up until 2 in the morning watching bad horror movies and eating microwave popcorn with too much butter. I thought if anyone would at least ask for my side, it would be her. I sent her a long message. I explained everything. I told her about Callum's phone calls, about the fake financial advisor, about how the estate attorney had confirmed there were no tax issues. I didn't mention the recording. I wasn't ready to play that card yet. But I gave her enough to at least create doubt. She read the message. I saw the little indicator that said she'd opened it at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. She never replied. That silence hit harder than any of the phone calls. Rochelle didn't even think I was worth a response. By the following Monday, the situation had started leaking into my professional life. My supervisor, a woman named Diane, who I respected deeply, pulled me into her office and closed the door. She had a careful expression, the kind people wear when they're about to say something they've rehearsed. "Jessamine, I want you to know this isn't a formal conversation, but a few people have brought something to my attention. There's a social media post circulating that seems to reference you and a financial situation involving your family. One of our board members saw it and asked me about it." My face went hot. "Diane, it's a family misunderstanding. It's not, I believe you. But I need you to understand the position this puts me in. We work with vulnerable populations. Our funding comes from donors who trust our integrity. If this becomes public in a way that connects to the organization, I may have to act. Not because I want to, but because the board will require it." She wasn't threatening me. She was warning me. And the worst part was that she was right. I worked with families who had lost everything: housing, stability, safety. The idea that my name might be associated with financial fraud, even falsely, could damage the program I'd spent 3 years building. I went home that night and did something I hadn't done since college. I wrote a letter. By hand, on lined paper. In blue ink. I wrote it to my mother. I told her everything. The real timeline. The phone calls from Callum. The fictional financial advisor. The estate attorney's confirmation that nothing had been altered. I wrote 5 pages. I sealed it in an envelope and mailed it the next morning. She never acknowledged receiving it. I found out weeks later from a secondhand comment Rochelle made to a mutual friend that my mother had opened the letter, read the first paragraph, and thrown it away. She told my aunt it was more of Jessamine's manipulation. That word, manipulation, coming from my mother, about me. I had spent my entire childhood being the easiest, most invisible child in that house. I had never manipulated anyone. I didn't know how. And now that word was being stapled to my name by the people who should have known me best. I stopped eating regular meals. I'd have coffee in the morning and maybe toast at night. I lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks without trying. I wasn't sleeping through the night. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning with my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached, staring at the ceiling, running through conversations in my head. Conversations I wanted to have but knew no one would let me finish. There was one night, a Wednesday, late October, when I came very close to sending the recording to everyone. I had it queued up. I'd drafted a message to the family group chat. Listen to this before you decide who I am. My thumb hovered over the send button for a full minute, but I didn't press it. Not because I was being strategic, not because I had some master plan forming. I didn't send it because I was afraid. Afraid that even with his own voice admitting what he'd done, they'd still find a way to make it my fault. They'd say I recorded him without consent. They'd say I edited it. They'd say I provoked him into saying those things. I knew my family well enough to know that the narrative had already been set, and evidence alone might not be enough to crack it. So I put my phone down. And I sat in the dark. And I made a decision that I think saved me, though it didn't feel like salvation at the time. I decided to stop reaching out. No more calls, no more letters, no more explanations. If my family wanted to believe Callum's version without asking me a single question, then I couldn't fight that. I couldn't argue someone into trusting me. Trust isn't something you can prove with words. It's something people either extend to you or they don't. And my family had made their choice. I went back to work the next day. I told Diane the situation was being handled privately and would not affect the organization. She nodded. She didn't ask for details, and I was grateful for that. I started going to the gym in the mornings before work. Not for fitness. I needed somewhere to put the anger. I ran on the treadmill until my legs burned and my lungs ached, and the voice in my head that kept replaying my mother's words finally went quiet, even if only for 30 minutes. I bought groceries. I cooked dinner. I showed up to every meeting on time. I answered every email. I held myself together with the kind of discipline that looks like strength from the outside but is really just the refusal to let someone else's lie be the thing that takes you down. And every night, before I went to sleep, I opened the voice memo app and looked at that recording. 11 minutes and 42 seconds. Callum's voice, his plan, his words. I didn't listen to it anymore. I just looked at the timestamp, reminded myself it was there, that the truth still existed, even if no one wanted to hear it. Yet, one evening in early November, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a bowl of soup I'd made from scratch, the first real meal I'd cooked in weeks, and I looked across the counter at Grandma Lily's ceramic rooster. The paint was chipped on one wing. One of its little feet had been glued back on, probably decades ago. It was ugly and absurd, and it was the most precious thing I owned. I said out loud, to no one, to the rooster, to Grandma Lily, to the empty apartment, "I'm not going to disappear." It wasn't dramatic. I didn't stand up or clench my fist or have some cinematic moment of transformation. I just said it, quietly, sitting in my kitchen with soup going cold in front of me. But I meant it. And that was the night things started to shift. Not because the world changed, but because I stopped waiting for the people who hurt me to give me permission to keep going. November became December. December became January. The silence from my family held firm. No calls. No texts. No holidays. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment with a rotisserie chicken and a movie I can't even remember now. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt tired, but I also felt something new growing underneath the exhaustion, something quiet and stubborn, like a root pushing through concrete. I threw myself into work. The nonprofit I worked for, Bridge Access we called it, had been struggling to expand its housing referral program into 2 neighboring counties. The logistics were tangled. Funding applications kept getting returned with requests for more data. Partnerships with local shelters were stalling because no one had time to build the relationships. It was the kind of problem that sat on everyone's desk, but no one fully owned. I asked Diane if I could take it on. She looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "That project has been stuck for 18 months, Jessamine." "I know. I want to try." She studied me for a long moment. I think she saw something in my face that told her I needed this. Not just professionally, personally. I needed a problem I could actually solve. A broken thing I could actually fix. "All right," she said. "It's yours." I started driving out to the partner counties twice a week after work. I sat in community center conference rooms with shelter directors and county housing officials and listened to them explain why they didn't trust our organization to follow through. I took notes. I didn't promise anything I couldn't deliver. I came back the next week with answers to their concerns, printed out, organized, stapled. Then the next week. Then the next. By February, 2 shelters had signed partnership agreements. By March, we had a pilot referral system running in Chester County. By April, the first family was placed through the new pipeline, a mother and 2 daughters who'd been sleeping in their car for 3 weeks. I drove out to meet them the day they got their keys. The older daughter, maybe 8 years old, walked into the empty apartment and spun around in a circle in the living room with her arms out, like she was trying to touch all the walls at once. I sat in my car after that visit and cried for 15 minutes. Not because I was sad, because I'd felt, for the first time in months, like the person I actually was. Not the person Callum had made me into with a single phone call. Diane noticed the change. She started inviting me to board meetings, introducing me to funders, including me in strategic conversations I hadn't been part of before. In May, she told me she was recommending me for a regional coordinator position that was opening up, a significant promotion with oversight of programs across 3 counties. "You've earned this," she said. I don't say that casually. Diane became something I hadn't expected. Not exactly a mentor in the formal sense. She never sat me down and gave speeches about leadership or resilience. She just consistently treated me like someone whose judgment could be trusted. She asked my opinion and then actually used it. She corrected me when I was wrong without making me feel small. And once, after a particularly difficult board meeting where a funder had questioned the expansion data, she walked with me to the parking lot and said, "You held your ground in there. That's harder than people think." I almost told her about Callum, about the recording, about the family that had erased me. But I didn't. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I was learning something important. That my story didn't have to be defined by the worst thing someone else did to me. I could carry it without letting it be the introduction to every conversation. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself while the people who broke you didn't even notice you were gone, You know what that feels like. It's not inspiring. It's not a montage. It's just showing up, day after day, choosing to be someone on purpose instead of someone by accident. Around the same time, something unexpected happened on the legal side. Donald Prewitt, the estate attorney, contacted me directly. He'd been processing the final disbursement of Grandma Lily's estate and had run into a problem. Someone had submitted a change of beneficiary form for the savings account, dated 2 weeks before Grandma Lily's death, redirecting my portion into a different account. The signature on the form was supposed to be mine. It wasn't my signature. Prewitt knew it immediately. He'd seen my actual signature on half a dozen documents during the estate process. The forgery wasn't even close. It slanted the wrong way. And whoever had done it had spelled my middle name wrong. My middle name is Corinne. The form said Corinne. 1 letter off. A small mistake, but the kind of mistake you only make if you're working from memory instead of looking at the real thing. Prewitt asked me to come into his office. I drove out to Ridley Park on a Saturday morning, sat in his wood-paneled conference room, and he showed me the form. It had been submitted through a third-party financial services company. Not a real firm, but a registered LLC that had been created only 4 months earlier. The registered agent on the LLC was a name I didn't recognize. But when Prewitt dug into it, the mailing address linked back to a P.O. box in Wilmington. Wilmington. The same city Callum had mentioned when he told me about his fictional financial advisor, Greg Pallister. Prewitt looked at me across the table. Jessamine, I'm not a criminal attorney, but I have to tell you, this form is a forgery, and someone used it to attempt to redirect estate funds. That's fraud. I'm obligated to flag this with the probate court. I sat very still. My hands were flat on the table. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. There's something else you should know, I said. And then I told him about the recording. I played it for him right there in his office, from my phone, on speaker. 11 minutes and 42 seconds of Callum's voice, explaining exactly how the money would be moved, exactly what I would sign, exactly how it would look like a legitimate tax maneuver. Prewitt listened with his pen in his hand, not writing anything, just holding it. When the recording ended, he set the pen down and leaned back in his chair. How long have you had this? Since before he made the call to my mother. He exhaled slowly. Jessamine, do you understand what this means? This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is documented evidence of attempted estate fraud, combined with a forged financial document. If you want to pursue this, there are real legal avenues here. I told him I needed time to think. He nodded and said he'd hold the probate filing until I decided how I wanted to proceed. But he made it clear. The forged form would be reported to the court regardless. That was his legal obligation, and it wasn't optional. I drove home with the windows down, even though it was barely 50 degrees outside. The air felt necessary. I needed something cold and real on my skin to keep me in my body, because my mind was racing ahead to places I wasn't ready to go. I had the recording. I had the forged document. I had an estate attorney who could testify that the entire story Callum told our family was fabricated. For the first time since October, the truth wasn't just something I knew privately. It was something that existed in the world, documented, verifiable, real. But using it meant detonating my family. Not the version of my family that Callum had already destroyed. That was gone. It meant detonating the idea of my family. The last thread of hope that maybe, someday, this could be quietly resolved. That maybe Callum would come to his senses. That maybe my parents would eventually ask me for my side. That hope had been keeping me company for 7 months, like a low candle in a dark room. And now I had to decide whether to blow it out myself. 2 weeks later, I got an email that made the decision for me. It was from the board of directors at Bridge Access. They'd received an anonymous letter, typed, no return address, alleging that I had a history of financial misconduct. It cited the estate situation by name. It described me as currently under investigation for fraud. It recommended that the organization terminate my employment immediately to protect its reputation. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and looked at the ceramic rooster on my kitchen counter. "Okay, Grandma," I said quietly. "Okay." Callum wasn't going to stop. He wasn't going to let this fade into silence. He was going to keep pushing until I had nothing left. And the only thing standing between me and complete destruction was an 11-minute recording and the truth. It was time. I didn't act out of rage. That's what people assume when they hear this part of the story. That I finally snapped, that some dramatic switch flipped inside me. It wasn't like that. It was more like stepping off a ledge you've been standing on for months, calmly, with both eyes open. The anonymous letter to my board changed the math. This wasn't just about family anymore. Callum was reaching into my career, my livelihood, the work I'd built with my hands over 3 years. He was trying to take the one thing I had left, so I called Donald Prewitt and told him to file the probate report on the forged document. I called a lawyer, a real one, a woman named Sharon Kettlewell who specialized in estate litigation, and I retained her with money I'd saved over the last year. And I made one more call, the hardest one. I called my mother and asked her to come to dinner. She was quiet for a long time. I could hear her breathing, that particular rhythm she had when she was weighing something. Finally, she said, "Why?" "Because I have something to show you. And after you see it, you can make whatever decision you want. But I need you to see it first." "Will Callum be there?" "No." Another long pause. "Fine, Saturday. But I'm bringing your father." That was exactly what I wanted. I chose a restaurant. Not a fancy one. A family diner on Route 12 called Max, with vinyl booths and bad lighting and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since morning. I chose it because it was neutral territory. No memories attached. No emotional weight in the walls. I arrived 20 minutes early. I sat in a corner booth facing the door and ordered water. I had a folder on the table in front of me. Inside the folder, a printed transcript of Callum's recording, the forged change of beneficiary form with the misspelled middle name, a letter from Donald Prewitt confirming no legitimate account changes had been made, and a copy of the anonymous letter sent to my board. I also had my phone, with the recording loaded and ready. My parents walked in at 6:15. My mother was wearing her gray coat, the one she wore to church. My father was behind her, hands in his pockets, looking at the floor. They slid into the booth across from me, and for a moment none of us spoke. The fluorescent light above our table buzzed faintly. "Thank you for coming," I said. My mother folded her hands on the table. "Say what you need to say, Jessamine." I didn't start with the recording. I started with the folder. I slid the forged document across the table and pointed to the signature line. "That's supposed to be my signature. Look at the middle name." My father leaned in. I watched his eyes move across the form. He frowned. "Corinne," he said quietly. "That's not how you spell it." "No, it's not. Because I didn't sign this. Someone else did. Someone who didn't bother to check." My mother hadn't touched the paper. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Not hostile, but guarded. Fortified. I slid the letter from Prewitt across next. "This is from Grandma Lily's estate attorney. He confirms that no legitimate changes were made to the disbursement. No tax complications existed. The story Callum told you was fabricated." My mother's jaw tightened. "Callum said he spoke to a financial advisor. Greg Pallister." "Greg Pallister doesn't exist, Mom." "I searched for him. The firm doesn't exist. The LLC that submitted the forged form was created 4 months before Grandma died, and its mailing address is a P.O. box in Wilmington, the same city Callum referenced when he pitched the scheme to me. Pitched the scheme to you? My father looked up. What do you mean? This was the moment. I took my phone out, placed it flat on the table between us, and pressed play. Callum's voice filled the booth. Low, steady, persuasive. The same voice that had charmed every room he'd ever walked into. And in that recording, he laid it all out. The temporary account, the transfer, the fictional tax advantage, the form he wanted me to sign. Every detail. His plan, in his words. With his mouth. My mother didn't move for the entire 11 minutes and 42 seconds. Her hands stayed folded. Her eyes stayed on the phone. My father leaned back against the booth and put one hand over his mouth, the way he did when he was watching something on the news that disturbed him. When the recording ended, the silence was thick enough to feel on your skin. My mother spoke first. When was this recorded? 3 weeks before he called you. He called me twice. The first time, he floated the idea. The second time, he gave me the details. I recorded the second call. Why didn't you tell us immediately? I looked at her. I held her gaze and I didn't blink. I tried. I called you the morning it happened. I called Dad. I called Aunt Petra. I sent you a 5-page letter. You threw it away after the first paragraph. You didn't ask me a single question, not one. You just believed him. My mother's face did something I'd never seen before. It didn't crumble. It shifted, like a wall developing a crack so fine you could barely see it, but you knew the structure underneath had changed. My father took his hand away from his mouth. His eyes were red. Jess, he said. Just my name. Nothing else. I slid the last document across the table. The anonymous letter sent to my board. This was mailed to my workplace 3 weeks ago. It accuses me of financial misconduct and recommends I be fired. It references the estate by name. No return address. Typed. Not handwritten. My mother picked it up. She read it slowly. When she set it down, her hand was trembling. I'm not showing you this to punish you, I said. My voice was steady, but it took everything I had to keep it that way. I'm showing you because you deserve to know the truth. What you do with it is up to you. I put the folder back together. I placed a $20 bill on the table for the coffee I hadn't touched, and I stood up. Jessamine, wait. My father started. I can't do this part for you, Dad. You have to decide what you believe. But I'm done defending myself against something I didn't do. I walked out of that diner into the parking lot. It was dark. Early June, warm air, the smell of cut grass from somewhere nearby. I got in my car and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, and I shook. Not crying. Just shaking. The way your body releases something it's been holding for too long. Tell me what you would have done in that moment. Would you have stayed? Would you have said more? I think about it sometimes. Whether I should have waited at that table and let them respond. But I knew that if I stayed, I'd start hoping again. And hope, in that family, had only ever been used against me. I drove home. I fed myself. I showered. I went to bed. And for the first time in 8 months, I slept through the entire night. The call came 3 days later. Not from my mother or my father, from Callum. It was a Tuesday evening, just past 8. I was at my kitchen table reviewing a grant proposal for the Chester County expansion when my phone lit up with his name. I stared at it for 4 rings. Then I answered. Jess. His voice was different. Not the smooth, warm version. Tight. Controlled. Like someone holding a door shut against a wind that was starting to win. Callum. Mom and Dad came to see me today. They played me some recording. A pause. I don't know what you think that proves, but you're making a huge mistake. I didn't respond. I just let the silence sit there. Are you listening? You recorded a private conversation. That's illegal. I could have you charged? It's a one-party consent state, Callum. I looked it up months ago. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear him recalculating, the gears shifting behind his voice, searching for the next angle. Okay, fine. So you have a recording of me talking about a financial strategy. That doesn't prove I did anything wrong. I was trying to help you. I was trying to simplify the estate process, and you twisted it into something it wasn't. And the forged document? The change of beneficiary form with my middle name spelled wrong? Silence. The LLC in Wilmington? The one registered 4 months before Grandma died? The P.O. box? More silence. The anonymous letter to my employer accusing me of fraud? His breathing changed. Faster. Shallower. And then he did what Callum always did when the ground shifted beneath him. He pivoted to emotion. You know what, Jess? You've always been like this. Always keeping score. Always quietly collecting evidence like some, I don't know. Like you've been waiting for me to fail so you could feel superior. That's what this is really about. You resent me. You've resented me our entire lives. That's not going to work anymore, I said. My voice was calm, and I meant it to be. Not cold, just finished. You lied to our entire family. You forged a legal document. You tried to steal my inheritance and then blamed me for it. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to get me fired. I never sent any letter to your job. The postmark was from Wilmington, Callum. Same city as your P.O. box. He went quiet. Really quiet. And for a brief moment I thought I heard something underneath the silence that sounded almost like fear. What do you want? He asked. His voice had dropped. The performance was gone. This was the real Callum, the one who only appeared when every other version had been tried and discarded. I want you to tell them the truth. Jess. Not for me. I have the evidence. The estate attorney is filing a report with the probate court. My lawyer is building a case. This is going to come out whether you cooperate or not. But you have one chance to tell Mom and Dad yourself, before it becomes something a judge tells them. He didn't say anything for a long time. I could hear ambient noise on his end. A television. Maybe traffic through an open window. Normal life sounds that felt absurd given what we were discussing. And if I do? He said finally. If I tell them? Then what? You drop the legal stuff? That's not my decision alone. The forged document has already been flagged. The probate court is involved. I didn't start that. Prewitt was legally required to report it. So I'm just supposed to, what? Confess? And hope for the best? You're supposed to take responsibility for what you did. What happens after that is the consequence, not the punishment. He hung up. No goodbye. Just a click, and then nothing. I set my phone down and looked across the kitchen at the ceramic rooster. Its chipped wing, its glued-on foot, its ridiculous painted smile. You called it, Grandma, I whispered. The next 72 hours moved fast. Callum didn't confess voluntarily. I hadn't expected him to, but the probate court filing did what I couldn't do with words alone. It created an official record. The forged document was flagged as fraudulent. The LLC was traced and connected to an email address registered in Callum's name. The estate attorney submitted a formal statement outlining the timeline, the falsified form, and the lack of any legitimate tax issue. Sharon Kettlewell, my lawyer, sent a cease and desist letter regarding the anonymous communication to my employer. She also advised me that I had grounds for a civil suit: defamation, tortious interference with employment, and attempted estate fraud. I told her to prepare the paperwork but hold off on filing. I wanted to see what happened next. What happened next was my mother. She called me on a Friday morning, early, before 7. Her voice was raw in a way I'd never heard before. Not dramatic, not performative, just worn down, like fabric rubbed too thin. Jessamine, I need to tell you something. Okay. Your father and I went to see Donald Prewitt yesterday. He showed us everything. The forged form, the LLC paperwork, the court filing. She paused. I heard her swallow. Callum came to the house last night. We confronted him. I waited. He denied it at first. For about an hour, he denied everything. He said you fabricated the evidence, manipulated the attorney, edited the recording. He had an answer for everything. Her voice wavered. And then, your father did something I've never seen him do. He stood up from the table, walked to the living room, came back with Grandma Lily's notebook, the one from the kitchen drawer, and he set it on the table in front of Callum. I closed my eyes. The notebook. The one where Grandma Lily had recorded every visit, every request, every pattern. Your father opened it to a random page and read it out loud. And then another page. And another. And Callum just sat there. He stopped talking. He stopped arguing. He just sat there staring at that notebook. And eventually he said, my mother's voice broke. I thought she didn't notice. That sentence hit me in the chest like a physical thing. I thought she didn't notice. As if Grandma Lily's awareness of who he was had been the one thing Callum never accounted for. He'd managed everyone else. He'd charmed the family, controlled the story, built the performance. But he couldn't retroactively fool a dead woman who had been writing down the truth in a notebook for years. He admitted it, Jessamine. Not all of it. Not gracefully. But enough. The financial scheme. The forged form. He said the letter to your employer was sent by a friend of his. Someone he'd told his version of the story to, who acted independently. Whether that's true? I don't know. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was standing at my kitchen window, looking out at the parking lot behind my building. A woman was loading groceries into her car. A normal morning. An ordinary world continuing while mine rearranged itself. Mom, I said carefully. Why are you telling me this? She was quiet for what felt like a full minute. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Because I threw away your letter. Because I didn't ask you a single question. Because I chose to believe him without even... She stopped. Took a breath. I don't know how to fix that, Jessamine. I don't know if I can. I don't know if you can either, I said. Not to hurt her. Because it was true. Type karma if you believe the truth always comes out. Because it did come out. Not on my timeline. Not the way I would have chosen. But it came. I didn't forgive anyone quickly. I want to be clear about that because I think people expect a moment. A hug. A tearful reconciliation. Someone saying, I'm sorry. And the other person saying, it's okay. And then everything resets like nothing happened. That's not how it works. Not when the damage goes this deep. Not when the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones who helped tear you apart. After my mother's call, things shifted in the family. But slowly. And not cleanly. My father sent me a text 2 days later. It said, I should have listened. I'm sorry. Jessamine. 12 words. It wasn't enough. But it was the most emotionally direct thing my father had ever said to me in 26 years. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit in my phone for a week before I wrote back. Thank you for saying that. That was the beginning, but I set the pace. My Aunt Petra called and left a voicemail that was mostly awkward silence followed by, I think I owe you an apology, sweetheart. I didn't call her back. I sent a short text saying I appreciated her reaching out and that I needed time. She respected it, which surprised me. Rochelle, the cousin who'd posted the accusation online, who'd read my message and never replied, she sent me a DM long, emotional, full of justifications wrapped in apology. She said she'd felt pressured by the family narrative, that she hadn't known the full story, that she'd been afraid to go against what everyone else believed. I read it twice. Part of me understood. Part of me thought, you could have just asked me. You could have sent one message, one question mark. You chose not to. I told her I wasn't angry, which was true, but I also told her I wasn't ready to pretend we were fine, which was also true. She said she understood. Maybe she did. Callum and I didn't speak. Not for a long time. The probate court processed the fraud finding. The forged document was formally invalidated. The estate was dispersed according to the original will. 50-50, the way Grandma Lily intended. My portion went into a savings account I opened in my own name, at a bank I chose, with no one else attached to it. Sharon Kettlewell advised me that a civil case was strong. Defamation, the forged document, the interference with my employment. There was enough for a real lawsuit. I thought about it for weeks. I weighed it carefully, not emotionally, and ultimately, I told Sharon to send a formal demand letter instead of filing suit. The letter outlined everything Callum had done, cited the legal consequences he could face, and demanded three things: a written admission of the false statements made to the family, a written retraction sent to my employer's board of directors, and a commitment to a structured repayment of legal fees I had incurred defending myself. Callum signed the agreement within 10 days. His written admission was short, barely a page, and it was clearly drafted by his own attorney to minimize liability. It didn't contain the word sorry, but it acknowledged that the claims he'd made about me were false, that the forged document was submitted without my knowledge or consent, and that the anonymous letter to my employer contained fabricated allegations. I sent a copy to Diane. She read it in her office with the door closed, and when she came out she said, "I'm glad this is resolved, Jessamine." Then she handed me the printed agenda for the next board meeting, where my promotion to regional coordinator was being formally voted on. I got the promotion, unanimously approved. The work continued. The Chester County expansion grew. By the end of that year, Bridge Access had placed 47 families through the new referral system. I hired 2 part-time coordinators. I trained them myself, driving out to partner shelters on weekday evenings, sitting in conference rooms with lukewarm coffee and printed resource guides, doing the slow, patient, unglamorous work of building something that actually helps people. If you've ever rebuilt your life after someone tried to erase you, not with revenge, not with drama, but with quiet, stubborn, one foot in front of the other work, then you know that it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like Tuesday. It feels like making dinner and answering emails and going to bed at a reasonable hour. It feels ordinary, and the ordinary is the victory. My parents and I rebuilt slowly. We didn't do family therapy or have long emotional conversations. We just started with small things. My father called me on Sundays. Short calls. 10 minutes. Mostly about weather and work. My mother sent me a birthday card in February. Handwritten. She didn't reference the past. She just wrote, "I'm proud of who you are." I put it in my desk drawer and looked at it sometimes when the day was hard. I set boundaries. Clear ones. I told my parents that my relationship with Callum was separate from my relationship with them, and that I would not be discussing him with them. I told them that trust had to be rebuilt through consistency, not gestures. I told them I loved them, but that love and access are 2 different things, and they had to earn the second one back. They listened. My mother struggled with it. She wanted to fast forward past the discomfort, to reach the part where everything was normal again. But I held the line, gently, firmly, every time. Callum moved. I heard secondhand that he'd relocated to Baltimore. Whether he got help, whether he reflected, whether he changed, I genuinely don't know. I hope he did. The way you hope for rain in a drought. Not because you believe it's coming, but because the alternative is too dry to live in. I didn't hate him. That part surprised even me. I expected hatred, or at least a sharp, satisfying anger that I could carry around like a weapon. But what I actually felt was something closer to grief. I grieved the brother I thought I had, the one who taught me to ride a bike, the one who let me sit in his room while he played guitar. That person may never have fully existed. Or maybe he did. Once. Before whatever broke inside him took over. Either way, he was gone. And I mourned him the way you mourn someone who's still alive, but unreachable. One evening in late autumn, about a year after the diner meeting, I was cleaning my apartment and I picked up the ceramic rooster to dust the counter underneath it. It was heavier than it looked. I turned it over, the way I'd done 100 times before, but this time I noticed something I'd missed. On the bottom, scratched into the glaze in Grandma Lily's handwriting, were 2 tiny words: "Stay steady." I stood there in my kitchen holding that ridiculous ceramic bird, reading those 2 words over and over: "Stay steady." That's what she'd been telling me all along. Not fight back. Not get even. Not prove them wrong, just stay steady. Hold your ground. Let the truth do its work on its own timeline. I put the rooster back on the counter. I finished cleaning. I made tea. I sat by the window and watched the streetlights come on, one by one, down the block. My name is Jessamine Thornberry. I am 27 years old. I am a regional program coordinator for a nonprofit that gives families a second chance at stability. I have a savings account with my grandmother's gift in it. I have an apartment with good light and a ceramic rooster with a chipped wing. I have a family that is learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to see me. And I have a recording I hope I never have to play again. Stay steady. That was the lesson. Not just for what happened with Callum, but for everything. The people who try to rewrite your story are counting on you to either explode or disappear. They don't know what to do with someone who just keeps going, who keeps showing up, who keeps being exactly who they are, quietly, stubbornly, without permission from anyone. If this story meant something to you, if any part of it felt familiar, I want you to hear me say this directly. You are not the story someone else tells about you. You are what you do when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when the only audience is your own reflection. Thank you for listening to this all the way through. If you connected with Jessamine's story, leave a comment and tell me which part stayed with you. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. Stay steady.